On this slide, you see that I have included a video about how I would use sentence modeling in my class for my ESL students. Again, 8th grade mainstream English classroom. This would definitely work. My examples would work for intermediate and advanced ESL learners. However, the websites also on this page could be modified for your beginner ESL student, just to get them understanding the structure of basic sentences and then get them working from there, modeling their own sentences from those structures. So either of these approaches, either ones for more advanced intermediate or for beginners, I think would be a great way to bring the writing process to my students and to make it more accessible for my ESL students. One more thing I am excited about this year is the idea of portfolio writing. In past years, we would have one final portfolio at the end of every year, and it just never really seemed to adequately measure a child's growth in writing. I do like the idea of having premeditated writing assignments each month that would be a part of a larger year-long portfolio to truly demonstrate to our ENL students how they have grown as writers throughout the school year. I'm going to insert a picture of one of the pages from Paraguay and Boyles that works to capture this. And here it is. So I really like the example 7.8, 7.9, 7.10 to show how, in this case, Juan's writing, how it grew incrementally from month to month. And I think that this is a nice way to show students, to show parents, to show the community how much a student is growing in terms of being a reader and a writer. And I do think that students need to be reminded of this regularly throughout the year, because especially as an ENL student, sometimes the whole educational process can seem so daunting and growth can really not feel as if it's truly occurring. But I think by having monthly writing samples that will go into the portfolio, a child will have that feeling of accomplishment. Okay, the last thing that I will say about process writing, I promise, is the mantra that Paraguay and Boyle bring up, fluency, form, correctness. This mantra should remind me that I need to focus on one aspect at a time when looking at writing done by ENL students. However, one element should not be focused on to the exclusion of others. This is a writing continuum, and I need to understand what the learner needs as a developing writer, as well as what phase of the writing process that student is in. I was really interested in this whole idea of, again, process writing, so I did some further research on the web, and I got some really cool resources. These are just a few. So one is the National Writing Project. It's really a great resource. And as I was going through this site, one of the quotes that I really liked was that the author, Suzanne Leinberger, was talking about how she came to the understanding that an increase in writing activities alone does not necessarily lead to improvement in the craft of writing. If writers are to develop more than fluency, which they should, right, because this is fluency, form, correctness, so this is a continuum, writing teachers must coach students in the skills essential to writing with flair. For me, this has been an evolving understanding, and I think for me as well. So I really responded well to that aspect of the website. The other website that I included is right here, Fluency First, Reversing the Traditional ESL Sequence. And there was, I believe it's on page 75 of this study, a passage I'm going to read that I thought, again, really talks about fluency, form, correctness, and how this is just a beneficial way to approach process writing with ENL students. Krashen, in 1987, hypothesizes that the best classroom L2 acquisition will occur when the input provided to learners is comprehensible, interesting and or relevant, not grammatically sequenced, provided in abundant quantity and in such a way as to promote self-confidence and self-direction while arousing little or no anxiety, which we read about often through Paraguay and Boyle, right? We want to minimize the anxiety that our students feel when they're engaging with their language acquisition. After examining popular L2 teaching methods and finding most of them wanting in such input, he concludes that pleasure reading and conversation have the greatest potential for meeting all the requirements for optimum L2 acquisition because they are made up of real input and not the contrived type of input found in ESL textbooks and tapes. A whole language approach includes much pleasure reading and real conversation. So again, immersion, making it as authentic as possible, that's what's going to help us get that fluency aspect of the continuum. And the third resource that I've included here in terms of fluency form correctness is from George Fox University. And I like how in that, if you were to go check it out, there are 19 principles, 19 fluency first principles that I think teachers really need to attend to. I'll give the first 4 because I don't want to, speak ad nauseum about this. So the first 4 fluency first principles are that learners learn and acquire language by being exposed to it and using it meaningfully. Again, this overlap between the second resource and the third. Learners learn and acquire language through listening, speaking, reading, and writing it a lot. Bringing us back to word consciousness, bringing us back to, just getting students into the mire of language use. Number 3, activities that are fun, interesting, and relevant to one's own life are conducive to language learning and acquisition. Again, we heard of this often in Paraguay and Boyle's readings about having students write about what they know, write about their countries of origin, write about their families, write about experiences to get them into the language. And the 4th of 19 fluency first principles is that the development of language competence is a gradual process, which we as educators know. So that concludes my portion of the process writing and the different elements I'm really excited about implementing in my class for my ESL students in the upcoming school year. A few other things I'm excited about before I move into the challenges are as follows. Number 1, learning new languages. So the bulk of my students either speak Chinese, Korean, or Spanish. Spanish I am fairly familiar with, considering I took 8 years of French, so again, talking about cognates, I can make that transition. However, Chinese and Korean, I am definitely a novice at, and I would really like to learn some key phrases. That way I can assist in the acclimation process of my students. Broadening the books I have in my classroom libraries. In one of the posts weeks ago, I was talking with a fellow colleague, and it just dawned on me that I really have no classroom library books that are in a language other than English. So again, broadening that so that students feel as if their language is represented in the classroom. Also, just getting a wider variety of leveled reading. Moving on to this, being more aware of the stages of cultural accommodation. Reading about the silent period, I definitely was not as sensitive to that as I really should have been. I have to understand that all ENL students are going to pass through different stages at different times. So I have to be aware of these stages so that I can really try to decipher their actions and their process in my class. Working with our team of ENL teachers, I really would like to speak more closely with them. I would also like to go and visit the students I have in my mainstream English class in the ENL class to see how they behave there, because it's a completely different environment, and the way that I see them in my English-dominated class is probably going to be completely different, and I do want to be able to get a whole sense of my students, and I think that would be a really great way. Also talking about testing them and in working on a way that could, between me and my E&L staff, that we could really create valid and reliable testing to figure out where they are in terms of their reading, so that way I could see where I need to take them. And lastly, I hang my head in shame, strengthening my awareness of my E&L students' seating in class. I have to say, as I was looking back at my past year, many of my beginner E&L students were at the back of the class. So again, like, that's really horrible as I think about it. Page 20 of Paraguay and Boyle, they do talk about how it's a good idea to seat new students toward the middle or front of the classroom. So that's definitely something I have to be much more aware of as the year starts. Okay, next slides will be moving into the challenges.